Scores: 6.5, 6, 5.5, 6.5, 5.5. Heather, 404C.
Awards. 4, 3, 4, 3, 3.5. Jordan, 301C.
Scores: 5.5, 6,
Awards.
6.5, 7.5, 6.
5, 5, 4.5.
Laura,
5, 4.5.
113B.
103B.
Scores: 7, 7.5, 7, 7.5, 7. Cheryl, 403B.
Awards. 6.5, 6, 7, 6, 7.5. Brian, 101A.
Scores: 8, 7.5, 7.5, 7, 7.5. Lisa, 105C.
4, 4, 3, 4, 4.5. Rhea, 301B.
Scores: 6, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Elizabeth, 401B.
Awards. 7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 8. Kimberly, 301C. Awards.
Scores:
7.5, 7.5, 7,
5,
7, 7.5.
6
Louise,
across.
5231B.
Evelyn, 301C. Scores: 5.5, 5.5,
Awards.
5.5, 5, 5.
7, 6,
Logan,
6.5,
5152B.
Eleanor, 201B. Awards.
Scores:
7.5,
6, 6.5, 7, 6.5, 6, 5.
Amy, 301.
Corey, 105B.
Wait, can you not? Can you not? We both missed.
Wait, can you hold for a minute, Logan? Or Corey? Can you remember? I think you were 6.5.
Awards.
6.5, 6.5. The last
8,
scores?
7.5, 7.5, 7, 7.5.
I think it was 6,
Shay,
6,
301B.
6, 7. That's it. 6, 6, 7.
Awards.
What?
8, 8, 8, 8.
Okay, we're
Gabby,
good?
401B.
All right. Corey, 105B. Sorry.
Yeah.
Awards. 8.5, 8, 8.5.
Scores:
Margaret, 201B.
8, 8, 8.5, 8, 8. Jonathan, 401C.
7 and a half, 7 and a half, 7 and a half, 7, 7. Courtney, 105B.
Scores. 6, 6. Last score is 5.5. It's 6s across. Last score 5.5. Brian, 301C.
4 and a half, 4 and a half, 4 and a half, 5, 5 and a half. Tara, 201C.
Scores. 6, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 6.5. Thomas, 301A.
5, 4 and a half, 5 across. Mackenzie, 401B.
Scores. 6, 6.5, 6.5, 5, 6. Simone, 301C. Scores.
Awards.
6, 5, 5.5, 5.5, 7.
6, 5.
Rebecca, 5132D.
Grant, 401B.
Scores. 5, 5 across. Rebecca, 5111A.
Awards. 7 and a half, 6 and a half, 7 and a half, 7, 7. Evan, 401B.
Scores. 5.5, 5.5, 6, 6, 5.5. Kara, 401B.
Awards. 7, 7, 8, 7, 7. Derek, 301B. Jordan, 305C.
Scores. 7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 8, 8. Laurel, 201B.
Awards. 4 and a half, 4, 4, 4, 5 and a half. Derek, 301B. Awards.
Come on, Laurel.
7, 7, 7, 6 and a half, 7 and a half.
Scores.
Brian, 201.
6.5, 6, 6, 6, 6.5. Rachel, 201A.
Awards. 4 and a half, 4, 3 and a half, 4, 3. Rhea, 401B.
Scores. Scores.
Awards.
7, 7, 6.5, 7, 7.5.
8,
Cheryl, 103B.
8, 8, 8 and a half, 9. Louise, 401B.
Scores.
Awards.
5, 5.5,
7,
5.5, 5.5, 5.
7, 6 and a half.
Lisa, 5132D.
Eleanor, 203B.
Scores. 5.5. Is that a 5? 5, 6, 5,
Fours.
5. Elizabeth,
5.5.
403C.
6, 5.5. Amy, 401B. Awards. 9, 8, 8.5, 8.5, 7.5. Shay, 401B.
Scores.
Awards.
5, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 6.
Okay.
Evelyn, 401B.
Gabby, 402B. Gabby, 403B.
Scores. 7, 7, 6.5, 7.5, 7. Logan, 205B.
Awards. 8, 7.5, 7.5, 8, 8. Margaret, 301B.
Scores. 6.5, 7, 6.5, 6, 6.
7.5,
Corey, 205B.
8, 8.5.
I don't understand this.
Courtney, 201B.
Exactly, right?
Awards. 8.5, 8.5, 8,
Scores.
8.5,
3.5, 3, 4, 4.5, 5.
Tara,
Jonathan, 403C.
Awards.
No. Nope.
6, 7, 6.5, 7, 6.5. Mackenzie, 201C.
Scores.
Maggie, 200A.
Nice shower. 4, 4, 4, 4.5, 4.5. Brian, 401B.
Awards. 8.5, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5. Grant, 5111A.
Scores. 6.5, 7.5, 6, 7, 6.5. Thomas, 103B.
5, 3, 3.5, 4, 4.5. Evan, 5122D.
Scores. 7, 6.5, 7, 6.5, 7. Simone, 401B.
Awards. 7, 7, 8, 7.5, 7.
Scores.
Jordan, 401B.
6. I'm sorry. Yeah. First score is 6, 4.5, 5.5, 6, 6. Rebecca,
Awards.
304C.
8, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 6.5.
Scores. 5-5, 4-5, 4.5. Rebecca, 302C. Ugh. It's cross-country diving.
Forwards.
Scores.
6.5.
5-5-5, 4.5.
6.5. Brian, 401C.
They're all fives except the last one is 4.5. Yes. Laurel, 5230. I'm sorry, Kara, 403B. Sorry.
Forwards. 5, 5, 5, 6.
It's a 403B.
5132D.
Nice. Scores. 7.5. 7, 8, 8, 7. Laurel, 5233D.
7, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 7. Kimberly, 5122D. Awards. 7, 7, 6.5, 6.5, 8. D's, 301B.
Scores. 4, 4.5, 4, 5, 5.5.
7, 7.5.
Rachel,
Eleanor,
302C. Oh, that was sunny. I'm going to stay over there. Scores. 6, 6, 5.5, 6.5,
Ladies and
6.
gentlemen, PSA announcement. We have the group photo after this event on the 5 meter and 1 meter area over on this side. Just giving you a heads up on that PSA announcement. Back to the awards.
Awards.
Heather, 103B.
4.5. Amy, 5132D.
Her scores. 7, 7, 7.5, 7, 7.
Awards.
Laura, 403C.
8, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 8. Shay, 5132D. Awards. 7.5, 7, 7.5, 7, 7.5. Gabby, 201B.
Her scores. 7, 7, 7.5, 7, 6. I'm sorry, 6.5. Last score is 6.5. Cheryl, 105B.
5.5, 5.5, 6.5, 5.5, 5.5. Maggie, 5132D.
It is Cheryl.
Awards.
Scores.
6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 5.5, 5.5.
Thank you. 6, 6, 6.5, 6, 6. Lisa, 5134D. Scores.
7,
5, 6, 5, 5.5, 4.5.
Tara.
Elizabeth, 101C.
565
Boards.
Scores
6.5, 5.5,
6.5, 6 across.
5. Mackenzie. 202.
Evelyn, 5132D. Scores 6.5, 6.5, 7, 6.5,
Boards.
7. Logan, 305C.
Four and a half, 4, 4.5, 4.5, 4. Grant, 105B.
Scores 6.5, 7, 6.5, 7, 7.5. Corey, 403B.
Boards. 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6.5, 7.5. Evan, 105C.
Water. Thank you. Scores
Boards.
8, 7.5,
6 across, last score is 6.5.
8, 7.5, 8, 8.5, 8. Jonathan, 201C.
Boards. 6.5 across. Eric, 105C. Derek, 103B.
Scores 5.5, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 5. Brian, 5231D.
Boards. 7.5, 7, 7, 7, 8. Brian, 102C.
Scores
Boards.
3.5, 3, 3, 3, 4.5.
4, 4, 4.5.
Thomas, 5233D.
103B. Boards.
Scores 4, 4.5, 4.5, 4, 4.5. Simone, 5231D.
7.5, 7.5. Kimberly, 403C.
Scores 6, 6.5, 6, 6, 5.5. Rebecca, 204C.
Boards. 7, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 7.5. Louise, 303C.
Scores. 6, 6, 6, 7, 6.5. Rebecca, 201B.
Awards.
I can't get behind Keeper's dives. I can't
7,
do
6 and a half, 6 and a half, 6 and a half,
I do back
6
two
and
and
a
a
half.
half twister to my feet on the 5.
Eleanor,
Front
303C.
Front double like
I've done
on 5.
backflip and
Yeah.
that was awful.
Scores. 6.5, 6, 6 across.
6.5.
Oh, I'm sorry. Fourth score is 6.5. The rest is 6.
Awards.
Kara, 201B.
7 and a half, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 7 and a half. Amy, 104B.
Oh, it is. Right? Oh, I know. Okay, there's Rebecca.
Make sure you write yes.
Scores. 7.5, 7, 7.5, 7, 7. Laurel, 203B.
Shay, 105C.
Okay, wait. So this was Kara.
Yes. Okay, what's here? Here.
Okay, it's Kara is 7.5, 7,
7.5, 7,
7.5, 7, 7.
Awards.
Okay.
5 and a half, 4 and a half, 4 and a half, 4 and a half, 4. Gabby, 202A. Gabby, 203B.
Now you can recall the meets.
This is how I started 30 years ago. Doing score, writing score. Scores. 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 5. Right.
Maggie, 105C.
4.5, 5. Rachel, 5132D. Yes? 511B. 5111B.
Awards. 7 across, last score to 7.
Whoa, where'd the guy go?
Courtney, 301B.
Mr. George? I'll be right back. I pressed change dive.
Hold your scores.
What dive is she?
5111B.
Okay, so this.
Awards.
So 5, 1,
Hold your
5 and a half,
scores,
5,
B.
6, 6, 6.
I'm gonna do safe dive shoot.
Tara, 5211A.
There's 2 ways to do it. Okay, so Rachel scores for that.
Okay, scores, please. You got 0? 0, 0, 0, 3, 2.
Awards.
Okay. Heather, 105B.
Mackenzie, 5211A.
Next dive, it's checking to make sure that
Okay,
that you really meant
so this is where I messed up. So it's all gonna be okay. I just
0, 0, 0, 3, 2.
this is where I messed up.
Okay, next scores. 5, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Laura, 201B.
Awards. 6, 5 and a half, 5, 5 and a half, 6 and a half. Grant, 203B.
Scores. 6, 6, 6 across.
Awards.
Cheryl, 5132D.
5 and a half, 5 and a half, 5, 4 and a half. Evan, 202A. Awards. 6 and a half, 6 and a half, 6, 5, 6 and a half.
Scores. 7, 7, 7, 6.5, 7.5. Lisa, 301B.
Fours. 5 and a half, 5, 5, 5 and a half, 5 and a half. Derek, 203B.
Scores. 7.5, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 8. Elizabeth, 101A.
Awards. 6 and a half, 6, 6, 5 and a half.
Scores.
Bria, 203.
5, 4.5, 4.5, 4.5, 5. Evelyn, 105C. Scores. 6.5, 6.5, 6, 6, 6.5. Logan, 401B.
Awards. 7, 6 and a half, 6, 6 and a half, 6. Kimberly, 104B.
Scores. 8.5, 8.5, 8, 8.5, 8. Corey, 405C.
Awards. 5, 6, 6, 6, 6. Louise, 5132D.
Scores. 7, 7.5, 7, 8, 7. Jonathan, 203C.
6, 6 and a half, 7, 6 and a half, 6 and a half.
10:30.
Eleanor, 104C.
And then
104C. 401C, I'm sorry. Eleanor, 401B.
Scores. 4, 5, 4, 2, 5. Brian, 103B.
7, 7 and a half. Amy, 203B.
Scores. 6, 6, 5.5, 6.5, 6. Tom, 403B.
7. Shay, 203B. Awards. 6 and a half, 6, 6 and a half, 6, 6.
Scores.
Gabby, 301C.
6.5, 6, 6, 5.5, 5.5. Simone, 105C. Four, 4.5, 5, 4.5, 5.5. Rebecca, 5231D.
4 and a half, 4 and a half, 3 and a half,
Scores. 6.5, 6. 5.5, 6, 6. Rebecca, 202A.
Awards. 7, 6.5, 7, 7.5, 6. Courtney, 401B. 401B. I'm sorry. 303C.
Scores.
303B.
6, 6, 6. 6.5, 6.5. Kara, 203A.
Awards. 4.5, 4, 5, 5.5, 6.5. Grant, 303C.
Scores. 6, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Laurel, 301B.
Awards.
They're doing the live recording video.
7, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 7. Yeah.
Scores.
What your scores up again?
6, 6, 5.5, 6, 6.
6.5, 6.5.
Rachel, 103B.
Evan, 302C. Awards.
Scores.
6,
6, 6, 5.5, 6, 5.5.
Jordan,
Heather, 301B.
C.
Scores. 7, 7, 6.5, 7, 7. Laura,
4, 3,
203C.
Derek, 303C.
Scores. 6.5, 6.5, 5.5, 6, 6. Cheryl, 5134D.
6, 6, 6, 6.5, 6.5. Derek. Bria, 303C.
Scores. 5, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 5.5. Lisa, 302C.
Awards. 6.5, 4.5, 6, 6.5, 7.5. Kimberly, 203B.
Scores. 6, 6, 6, 6.5, 5.5. Elizabeth, 103B.
Awards. 3.5, 3.5, 4, 4, 3.5. Louise, 403.
Scores. 6, 6, 5.5, 6.5 across. Evelyn, 203A.
So this one's done. Yes. So print results.
Yes.
Awards.
Scores.
6, 6, 6, 5.5, 6. Ellie, 403C.
Yes. Yes. 5, 5, 5.5, 6, 6.5. Logan, 105C. That's what it says, 105C.
Awards.
Scores.
7, 7.
8, 8.5, 8, 7.5, 8.5.
303B.
Corey, 301A.
Awards. 7, 7.5, 6, 7, 8. Shay, 303B.
Scores. 7, 6, 6.5, 8, 8. Jonathan, 301C.
Awards. 4.5, 5, 5.5, 4.5, 5. Gabby, 302B. Hold on a second.
Scores. 5.5, 4, 5, 4.5, 5. Brian, 203C. Scores.
Awards.
6.5, 6.5, 7, 6.5, 7. Tom, 105B.
Six more events.
Scores. 6, 5.5, 6, 6, 5.5. Oh. The fourth score is 6. Last score is 5.5. Simone, 203C.
Okay, Simone. You got this. Yep. Same as on 1 meter.
You got it. You can do it.
Scores. 3, 4.5, 3.5, 4, 4. Rebecca, 201B. Scores. 7, 7, 7, 8, 7. Rebecca, 5222D. Scores.
Awards.
4.5, 5.5. Set of 5. 5, 4, 4.5.
6.5.
Kara, 301B.
401B.
Scores. 6.5, 7, 6, 6, 6. Laurel, 403B. 403C. Change to 403C.
403B.
Yep.
Forwards. 7, 6, 7.5, 7, 6.5. Evan, 403C.
Scores. 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 7. Rachel, 5131. I'm sorry, 5231D.
6.5, 6, 6, 6, 6. Jordan, 52, 25, 8.
Scores.
Forwards.
5.5, 5, 5.5, 5, 5.
5.5.
Heather, 201B.
Derek, 403B.
Scores. 6.5, 6, 6, 6, 6.5. Laura, 312. 301C. It's a change. 301C.
7, 6.5, 7.5, 7.5, 7. Bria, 403C.
Go ahead.
301C.
Scores. Incorrect dive.
Forwards.
Incorrect dive.
6,
It's all
6,
zeros.
7.5, 7, 7.
Okay, Cheryl, 301A.
Kimberly, 303C. Kimberly, 302B.
Scores. 8, 8, 6.5, 8, 7.5. Lisa, 201B.
7, 7, 7.5, 7, 7.5. Louise, 104B.
Scores. 6.5, 5.5, 5.5, 5.5, 6. Evelyn,
6.5,
303C.
6.5, 6. Ellie, 5132D.
Scores. 3, 3, 3, 3, 3.5. Logan, 201B.
Forwards. 7.5, 7, 8, 7.5, 7.5. Amy, 403B. Forwards. 7.5, 6.5,
Scores.
6.5. Shed,
8, 7, 7, 8, 7.5. Corey, 5134D.
Forwards. 5.5, 5, 5.5, 6, 4. Gabby, 5223D.
Scores 7.5, 7 across. Jonathan, 302C.
Forwards. 7.5, 7, 6,
Scores 4, 4, 3, 3, 3, 4.
That's 6 scores.
Okay, Brian, 303C.
Awards. 8 across. Courtney, 403D.
Fourth, fourth.
Awards. 6.5, 5.5, 6, 6, 6. Starting our last round of dives.
All right.
51,
Good job.
32D.
Scores 4, 3.5, 4, 4, 3.5. Tom, 203B.
Awards. 5, 4.5, 5.5, 4.5, 4.5. Evan, 5221D.
Scores 5, 5.5, 5.5, 5, 5.5. Simone, 302C.
Awards.
What?
7, 6, 7, 6.5,
511A. Change score.
Jordan, 5335D.
511A.
5111.
Go for it.
Awards. 4.5, 2.5, 4.
You ready?
4.
Yeah. Scores 5.5, 6.5, 5.5.
5235.
Oh, first score is 5. Second score is 6.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Rebecca, 301B.
Derek, 5133.
Scores 6, 6, 6, 6.5 across. Rebecca, 401B.
Awards. 7, 6.5, 7.5, 7.5, 6.5. Bria, 5231D.
Scores 6, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 7. Kara, 5132D. Scores 6, 5.5, 5.5, 6, 5.5. Laurel, 105B.
8, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5. Kimberly, 5223D.
Scores.
Louise,
7, 7, 6, 6.5, 6.5. Rachel, 202C.
awards. 7.5, 8, 7.5, 6.5. Ellie, 52.25.
Scores. 5, 6, 5.5, 5.5, 5. Heather, 203B.
And so, I was like, I put on the system that was like, oh, it's not. I know.
Awards.
Good. And I was like, Todd, there's no way.
Scores.
7, 7.5, 7.5, 8.
6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 6.5. Laura, 105C. Scores. 7, 7.5, 7.5, 7.5, 8. Cheryl, 201A.
7.5, 7, 7.5, 7, 7.5. Shay, 52.33D. Awards. 6.5, 6.5, 6.
Scores.
6.5, 6.
6.5, 6.5, 5.5, 6, 7. Lisa, 401B.
Awards.
Scores.
8.5, 8, 8.5.
6.5, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 7.
90, 52.
Evelyn, 403C. Scores. 7, 6.5, 6, 7, 6.5. Logan, 303C.
7, 7.5, 6, 7, 6.5. Courtney, 52.33D. That was a cheesy one.
Scores.
Awards.
8, 7, 7. Second score, 7. 7, 7.5, 7.5. Corey, 5131D.
Divers, thank you, judges.
All right,
Scores.
ladies and gentlemen, just keep in mind, after the 3-meter event, we're going to do a group
6.5,
photo, 1 meter side,
6.5,
platform. Group photo,
6.5,
1 meter side,
7,
1 meter
6.
platform.
Jonathan, 5111A. Scores.
And after the group photo, if you want to go to the top, Coach Mike Lewis.
4, 4, 3.5, 4.5, 4.
Photo. So if you want to go up to the top,
Brian,
Coach Mike's gonna help you
403C.
get to the top.
Okay. Not always.
Eric has something you want to share.
Scores.
Diving. Group photo.
4, 4.5, 5, 5.5, 5.
Thank you, Eric.
Tom, 5134D. Scores. 5, 5.5, 5, 5, 5. Simone, 403C.
Oh, that's for later.
Scores 6.5, 6.5, 6.5 across. Rebecca, 103B. Scores 6.5, 6, 5.5, 6, 6. Rebecca, 403C. Scores 6, 6, 6, 7, 6. Kara, 5231D.
Mark has the go-to sign-up sheet. I do. Yeah, in my bag.
Attention 1 meter divers, we'll do the awards right after the 3 meter
Scores.
on the far side of the pool.
6, 6.5, 6, 6.5, 6. Laurel, 5132D. Scores 7, 7.5, 7, 7, 6.5. Rachel, 403C.
What were the scores on that one?
7, 7.
Gotcha, okay. Thanks. Appreciate it.
Scores 5, 5.5, 6, 5.5, 5. Heather, 5233D. Scores 6.5, 6, 6, 7, 5.5. Laura, 5132D. Scores 6.5, 6.5, 7, 7, 6.5. Cheryl, 203A.
Get my phone now.
Scores. 7, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 7. Lisa, 403C. Scores. 7, 7, 6.5, 7 across. Evelyn, 5233D. Scores. 6.5, 7, 6.5, 7, 7. Logan, 5132D. Scores. 7.5, 6.5, 6.5, 7, 7. Corey, 303C. Scores. 8, 7.5, 8, 8, 8.5. And Rebecca, 401C. Scores.
Awesome job.
6, 6, 5.5, 6, 6.5. Thank you. Congratulations, divers. Thank you, judges. 6.5. And thank you, table workers.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we got the awards going. Novice divers, report over here to the far side. Novice divers, come on over. We're going to give out the novice diving awards for everyone right now. So on the 1 meter novice, Brian Proctor with
All right, ladies and gentlemen, right now, just so you know what's going on, that's the first set of divings done. We have to restart our systems every chance to restart the recording. So we're going to stop the online about 5 minutes before the next event. We'll be up online early again, starting the second part of the diving today, and we will be back up on YouTube and Facebook for you also, so that you can enjoy the afternoon, little free diving, see what this is all about. So stay tuned. We'll be back shortly, folks. Thank you very much. Bye.